Starship Troopers. There had been quite a bit of talk about this movie, well, maybe not recently, but some set of years in the recent past, about Starship Troopers being sort of a satire on tyranny. No, I remember. It was a debate on whether or not that was what they were going for. That's what it was. Because a lot of people thought it was this mindless action movie when it came out. And then after 9/11, they started saying that it was about tyranny. And yeah, I definitely see where that probably was a thought that crossed Paul Verhoeven's mind with like the SS uniforms and all the propaganda shit. But what's interesting is that the book kind of also implied it, and it's actually not even really clear in the book if that's what Robert Heinlein was going for either. It may have been satire, or it may have just been Robert Heinlein going on about the military because he'd been in it for so long in real life. Paul Verhoeven, the director, actually didn't even really finish reading the book. But to be fair, after chapter 1, it goes on about 9 or 10 chapters where he does nothing but talk about boot camp and military procedure, which to a reader's perspective, it's not all that interesting. And to pick apart every little difference between the book and a movie would take forever because very little of it was the same. But for this particular one, I want to address a fan theory that's been going around that ties into 9/11 conspiracy theories, that the government in the movie destroyed its own city so that it could invade another planet. Whoops. Hello. The movie was released a couple years before 9/11, but what's interesting is that the book, being written in the 1950s, is actually even more explicit in implying this than the movie is. At least I think it is. And like there are aspects of the movie that kind of exaggerated the implied tyranny of the book, like the SS uniforms, like the guy who gets stabbed in the hand for questioning his drill sergeant. In the book, he's told to go to the library and brush up on some reading material so that he can better understand the military's pecking order. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound so bad. I'll take that over getting stabbed. Yeah. In both book and movie, though, nobody on planet Earth can be a citizen without joining the military, and almost everybody the main character meets in the book that has been a veteran is missing an appendage somewhere. So it's like, There's also televised public hangings in the book as well. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. And like I said, Robert Heinlein may have just wanted to rant about the military for 20 chapters. That may have been it. There's also a subplot about a philosophy teacher struggling to get all these brainwashed Marines to think for themselves. The book also did a better job explaining how the world had become this super militaristic state. It basically came to this way because some members of the military had staged a coup and overthrow all the world's governments after being blamed for World War III. But I digress. Back to the 9/11 stuff. In both the book and the movie, war is declared after it's discovered that the giant bugs on another planet had destroyed Buenos Aires. In the movie, the closest thing anybody has to go off of how they pulled this off is giant bugs shooting lasers out of their ass and somehow making an asteroid hit Buenos Aires. This is obviously completely absurd, but the details on the attack on Buenos Aires in the book are almost all different. In the book, Rico's father actually survives the attack on Buenos Aires and winds up joining the military, and when the two of them meet in the service together, it becomes obvious that his father had completely changed his stance on the military. It's also worth noting that the war itself did not actually start with the giant bugs. It started with a mining colony on another planet that had rebelled and tried to become its own country. The rebelling mining colonies wound up striking an allegiance with the world military government on Earth simply because they didn't have the means to fight the giant bugs that had been inhabiting their planet. The big key distinction for me though, and I may be wrong because it had been some years since I'd read the book, but in the book, Rico spends most of it thinking that the bugs can pilot spaceships because the story that was actually told to them was that they flew here and bombed Buenos Aires. He's also told later that his best friend Carl was killed on a research base when it was attacked by giant bugs piloting spaceships. However, most of the book is actually written as if they were Rico's memoirs, and there's no line in the book where he describes seeing the bugs do this. Lots of other conflicting pieces of information too. In this particular setting, Earth is the most technologically advanced planet in the entire system that anyone's seen. And there are actually scientists speculating that evolution happens much slower on other planets because of a lack of radiation that would spur mutations. In the book, Rico studies to become an officer, graduates, and winds up doing more technical stuff for the war effort. In the course of his studies, Rico walks into his room to discover that his math tutor had shot himself, presumably over some missing documents, and it essentially winds up being swept under the rug later. So yeah, there's lots of reasons in the book to think that the government bombed its own city so that they could rally people to join the force and invade another planet. Rico's account of the last battle was among the most telling parts as well. At this point in the book, Rico is a fully fledged officer working with engineers on a rescue reconnaissance mission after a battle had already ended on the bug's home planet. They're also trying to capture these mysterious brain bugs that nobody's ever seen before. In the movie, he rescues his friends from one of them, and a drill sergeant later captures one. In the book, he's knocked unconscious and finds himself surrounded by worker bugs who make no attempts to attack him or capture him. He's knocked unconscious again later and wakes up in a hospital where he's just told that some brain bugs have been captured. Again, the key important details here on this are A, with the exception of the brain bugs, almost every single thing about these space bugs and their culture is known, and everything that's known seems to suggest that their mentality is very similar to that of Earth bugs. The other important detail is that the military in this setting also employs psychics who are able to knock people unconscious through messages that they send on the comm links. So it's not actually clear if Rico was knocked unconscious as a result of this or if he was just clumsy. I'm definitely leaning towards the psychic thing though. The book and movie end about the same way, with Rico becoming the commander of his own unit and an entire planet standing firm in their resolve that they're doing the right thing. And it's in this aspect that make it hard to discern if it was meant to be satire or not, because most examples of dystopian science fiction follow characters who are fighting against an oppressive government, not the ones who support it. And I think it's here that a lot of people began to pick it apart more closely than they initially did when it was released, because it makes more sense that people who support tyranny would believe they were justified in it. And both the book and the movie seem to have authors drawing from their own personal experiences as well. Robert Heinlein, like I said, had spent a lot of years serving in the military, and Paul Verhoeven may very well have been drawing off of his experience as a little kid living in Nazi-occupied Holland. Either way, they're both good, but the book definitely has more to say about the military than it does about Nazis. Oh, another interesting note, there's apparently an episode of Futurama that seems to be parodying the book more than the movie. It's the one where Earth invades a planet of giant bouncing balls, because characters in the book constantly talk about being on the bounce or bounce shit. I don't know. I don't know if it was military slang in the 50s or just something Robert Heinlein made up, but the word bounce is used like 5,000 times in the book. But they care a lot about how you die. It has to be heads up, on the bounce, and still trying. This was supposed to prepare us to learn to use any aimed weapons and to train us to be on the bounce. But we did slack down anyhow, and word came down from the top that if we didn't get on the bounce, say if you don't turn out on the bounce, okay now alright, back in ranks, on the bounce. So why weren't you on the bounce? The twerps have all gone home, and those that are left are eager, anxious to please, and on the bounce. Never mind, I despise you then, and I used to dream about ways to get to you, but you're always on the bounce. Got 13 minutes till sick call, on the bounce, soldier. To be able to go so far away that you can't see a tent, a sergeant, nor even the ugly faces of your best friends among the boots. Not to have to be on the bounce about anything. Yeah, the writers were probably sick of hearing us talk about bouncing all the time. Fuck, I got sick of it. They do say bounce a lot, though.
I'd rather die and take everybody with me than sit here one more minute and listen to these idiots talk about bouncing.
Please, stay calm. There's no need to bounce off the handle.
That's it, I'm saying it. A is for
Wait.
ant.